Every night, the dog vanished. Every morning, he returned with something impossible. Ethan never planned to adopt him, but now that dog was leading him straight into a mystery no one could explain. His wife had left. His friends had stopped calling. And Ethan, once an active, joyful man, now just moved through the motions of life. The dog wasn't even his idea. A neighbor had found it wandering near a highway and begged Ethan to take him in just for a few nights. The dog didn't have a name, didn't bark, didn't even wag his tail, just sat there, still and alert, with deep amber eyes that felt too knowing. Ethan called him Shadow, not because of his dark coat, but because he followed Ethan everywhere. Quiet, constant, like a shadow that refused to leave him alone. For the first few days, Shadow barely moved. He ate, slept, and sat near the door. At exactly 8:30 p.m. every night, he'd stand up, stretch, and wait by the door. If Ethan didn't open it, the dog would whine, softly, like a plea. Then, when let out, Shadow would disappear into the night. Every time he returned before sunrise. Dirty, sometimes limping, but always silent. Ethan figured he was just chasing squirrels, maybe wandering into nearby fields. It wasn't unusual, until the night Shadow came back with a shoe, a child's shoe, small, pink, worn out, caked in dry mud and leaves. Ethan stared at it for a long time. He lived alone, with no children in the area. The nearest neighbor's kids were both teenagers. He tried to ignore it, tossed the shoe in the trash. But the next night, Shadow returned, this time with a backpack, tiny, blue, covered in cartoon stickers, and inside, crayons, a juice box, a name tag that read, Lily, age 6. Ethan's heart dropped. He turned on the news, checked local websites, and there it was, a missing child alert. Lily Johnson, 6 years old. Last seen 4 days ago at the edge of Millwood Forest. Still missing. The forest was 15 miles away. He looked at Shadow, who just sat at the door again, eyes locked on Ethan's face. Waiting. That night, Ethan decided to follow. He dressed in dark clothes, grabbed a flashlight, and opened the door. Shadow looked up and took off into the darkness. Ethan followed. Through fields, fences, side roads, Shadow moved fast. But not randomly. He was tracking something. After nearly 40 minutes of running and hiking through brush, they reached the edge of the forest. And then, Shadow stopped, ears up, head tilted. Then he looked at Ethan and barked. The first time he'd ever barked. From behind the trees, something rustled. A shape emerged, a small child, barefoot, shivering, dirty. It was Lily. She stared at Ethan, blinking, then slowly walked toward Shadow and hugged him. "He came back," she whispered. "I knew he would." Ethan was frozen. He carried her home, called the police, and handed her over safely. Everyone called him a hero. He didn't argue. But he knew. The hero had 4 legs. But the story didn't end there. The next night, Shadow was gone again. And this time, he brought someone else. Ethan couldn't sleep. Even after Lily was found and taken home safely. Even after the local news aired the story and praised him for his instincts. He couldn't stop thinking about Shadow. The dog had known. Not just where to go, but who to find. That wasn't instinct. That was something else. And when Shadow disappeared the next night, Ethan knew. This wasn't over. He waited by the door. Midnight passed. No sign of him. But at 4:17 a.m., Ethan woke up to soft scratching at the back door. Shadow was there. His fur was wet. There was a fresh scratch on his leg, and tied loosely around his collar, a bracelet. Plastic, colorful, with lettered beads spelling a name, Ava. Ethan felt the same chill down his spine. He turned to the news again. typed "Missing Child Ava." It didn't take long. Ava Martinez, 9 years old. Missing for 3 weeks. Last seen playing near a rural campground in the northern part of the county. Ethan stared at the screen. That area was even farther than Millwood Forest, 20 miles away. Shadow lay at his feet, licking the scratch on his leg. Then he looked up, waiting again. Ethan stood, got dressed, and said the words out loud. "Okay, take me." They left at dawn. The journey was longer this time. Shadow moved quickly but deliberately, following some invisible trail. Through roads, backfields, private property. At one point, Ethan thought he saw Shadow sniff the air and change direction. 3 hours in, they reached an abandoned shack deep in the woods. No visible paths, no roads, just silence. Shadow stopped and sat. Ethan approached the building slowly. The door was cracked open. Inside, it smelled of mildew and rot. He stepped in. At first, nothing. Then, a cough. Behind a pile of blankets in the corner, a child. Thin, pale, wrapped in a hoodie several sizes too big. Avenue. She looked at Ethan with wide eyes, then at Shadow. "You're the one," she said. "The dog with the light." Ethan blinked. "The light?" "He glows," she whispered, "when it gets really dark." Ethan didn't know what to say. He carried her out, called 911, waited with Shadow beside him, just like before. The media exploded. Man helps rescue second child. Thanks to mysterious dog. Local hero or miracle animal? Coincidence or something more? People came from other towns. Reporters called. One of the officers even asked if Shadow was trained in search and rescue. He wasn't. No tags, no chip, no records. Just a dog who showed up one day and started saving children. Ethan began watching him more closely. Where he stared. What sounds made him twitch. How he always seemed to know where to go, even when there were no scents, no clues. He started writing things down, and that's when he noticed something strange. Each child Shadow brought home had gone missing near a body of water. A lake, a stream, a dried-up well. And all of them said the same thing. "I heard someone calling my name, but it wasn't a voice I knew. Something told me to follow. It felt safe, until it didn't. Then he came. The dog. He stopped it." Ethan started putting together a map. There was a pattern. Whatever Shadow was chasing, it was moving. Whatever he was protecting them from, it was real. And that night, for the first time since it all began, Shadow didn't wait by the door. He stood by the window, watching the woods, growling. Shadow didn't sleep that night. He paced, from door to window, from window to hallway. Back again. His fur stood on edge. His ears twitched with every sound. Ethan watched, trying to stay calm, but something deep inside told him. Tonight was different. By 3 a.m., Shadow let out a deep, low growl. Not at the door, not at the window, at the floor. Ethan followed his gaze. The basement. Without thinking, he grabbed a flashlight and opened the creaky wooden door. Shadow bolted ahead of him down the steps. The basement was cold, silent. Dust in the air. Old storage. Tools. Boxes. But Shadow was locked onto something behind the far wall. A small, bricked-up section. He scratched at it, whined, pawed again, harder. And then he barked. A sharp, urgent bark. Ethan dropped the flashlight, picked up a hammer, and started breaking through. Brick after brick fell to the ground. Behind them, a hidden crawl space, and inside it, a small box. Dusty. Wooden. Locked with rusted hinges. Ethan opened it. Inside, a photograph. Old. Faded. Torn at the corner. A young boy, smiling. His son. His throat closed. He hadn't seen this picture in years. He thought it had been lost in the fire. Shadow whined, gently. And then Ethan noticed, taped to the back of the photo, a note. Handwritten. Shaky letters. "There's one more. He's close, but I can't bring him. You have to remember." Ethan stared at it. Was it a message? From who? But in his heart, Ethan knew. Shadow was still watching. They ran, through woods and across hills farther than before. The sky began to lighten. The air thickened, damp, heavy. And finally, they reached the edge of a ravine, flooded. The river had overflowed from last night's storm. On the opposite side, a boy, no older than 7, clinging to a rock, barely conscious. Shadow barked furiously. Ethan froze. How had no one found him? Why was he here? He stepped forward, but the river was too strong. Without hesitation, Shadow plunged into the current. The water was wild, crashing. But Shadow swam, hard. He reached the boy, nudged him onto a broken log, and started pushing it toward the edge. But the log twisted. Shadow barked. The boy climbed. Shadow bit down on the edge, dragging him. And just as the boy reached shallow ground, the log snapped. Shadow slipped under. Gone. Ethan screamed his name, ran into the water, searched, cried. Nothing. He pulled the boy into his arms and collapsed on the shore. The boy was alive. But Shadow was gone. They searched for days. Rescue teams, divers, nothing. Ethan didn't speak to reporters, didn't sleep. But then, one morning, a ranger brought him something. Found on the riverbank. A collar. Shadow's. Tied to it. A single bead bracelet. The kind children make in school. But this one spelled out hope. Ethan cried for the first time in years. Not out of grief, but out of love. Weeks later, people still talked about the dog who saved 3 children. Some called it a miracle. Others said it was instinct. But Ethan knew better. Shadow wasn't just a dog. He was something more. A guardian, a guide, a soul that couldn't rest until he'd done what no one else could. One evening, Ethan sat on his porch, and from the corner of his eye he saw a flicker in the woods. Not a shape, not a bark, just a soft, warm glow. Amber, familiar. Then, gone. But in his heart, Ethan knew. Shadow was still watching,